Ma'am, can you pretend to be my mom for the school play? The lonely CEO's daughter whispered. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a cold winter afternoon when little Sophie, the lonely daughter of a successful CEO, found herself standing alone in a corner of the playground. Her father, a powerful man with a reputation for being ruthless in business, had always been emotionally distant. Sophie had never known the warmth of a mother's love. Her mother had left when she was just a baby, leaving her father to raise her, but his focus was always on work, and his absence in her life was felt every single day. Sophie was used to it by now, her loneliness becoming a constant companion. She had always wished for a mother's embrace, but that seemed like a dream that would never come true. Today, however, was different. It was the day of the school play, and Sophie had been given the lead role. But there was one problem. She had no one to play the part of her mother. As she stood in her costume, the tears welled up in her eyes. She wished, more than anything, that someone would come to her rescue. That's when she saw her, a woman who was sitting alone on the bench, a stranger to Sophie. She was older, dressed in a simple coat, but there was something kind in her eyes. Sophie hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been good at asking for help, but today, she didn't have a choice. Mustering up all her courage, she walked up to the woman and spoke in a quiet voice. Ma'am, can you pretend to be my mom for the school play? Just for today. The woman looked at her, surprised by the unexpected request. There was a pause, and then, without a word, the woman smiled softly and nodded. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe her luck. The woman agreed to step in, and for the first time in a long while, Sophie felt a sense of warmth wash over her. Little did she know, this seemingly small act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would change both their lives forever. As they made their way to the stage, Sophie couldn't help but feel a connection with this woman. She didn't know her, but something about her presence felt comforting. The woman walked beside her, helping her rehearse lines, offering gentle encouragement. Sophie smiled, the tension in her shoulders melting away. The play went on without a hitch, and Sophie delivered her lines with more confidence than she had ever felt before. When the curtain came down, Sophie's heart was full. She looked up at the woman, about to thank her for helping, when something unexpected happened. The woman bent down and whispered, "You did great, Sophie." Sophie blinked, her heart racing. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her voice shaking. The woman's smile grew warmer, but there was something mysterious in her eyes. "I know more than you think," she said, as she stood up, her posture changing from one of kindness to one of authority. Sophie blinked, confused, but the woman was already walking away, her heels clicking against the stage floor. She looked back at Sophie one last time and said, "You'll see me again, Sophie. And when you do, everything will change." Sophie stood there, staring after her. The woman's words echoed in her mind. Who was she? And why did she feel like she had just crossed paths with someone incredibly important? Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. What she didn't know was that the woman she had just met was someone much more powerful than she could ever imagine. And as fate would have it, their paths were about to cross again in a way Sophie could never have predicted. The next day, Sophie couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had stepped in to play her mother in the school play. The warmth she had felt during their brief encounter lingered, but it was the words the woman had whispered that really stuck with her. "You'll see me again, Sophie. And when you do, everything will change." Sophie didn't fully understand what that meant, but her curiosity was piqued. Who was this woman, and why did she feel like she was hiding something? Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change, and somehow, the mysterious woman was involved. Later that evening, Sophie's father, the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the country, returned home from another long day at the office. His presence filled the house with an undeniable coldness. Sophie sat in the living room, attempting to read, but her mind kept drifting. Her father barely spoke to her, his eyes always glued to his phone or laptop, absorbed in his world of business. Sophie longed for more than just the occasional good job when she did something well. She wanted him to notice her, to see her. But that was not how her father was. She had come to accept it, even if it hurt. The following morning, Sophie was heading to school when she saw the woman again. This time, she was not in the park but outside a large office building, dressed in an elegant suit that screamed confidence. Sophie hesitated for a moment before walking up to her. "Hi," Sophie said, her voice soft yet curious. "I didn't expect to see you here." The woman smiled, the same warm smile from before, but there was a glint in her eyes that made Sophie feel like there was more to her than met the eye. "Well, Sophie, I promised you'd see me again," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've been thinking about you. I think we could help each other." Sophie blinked in surprise. "How?" she asked, her heart beating faster. The woman took a deep breath, and for a moment, Sophie saw something vulnerable in her eyes, something she hadn't expected. "I know things haven't been easy for you. I know how it feels to be overlooked, to feel like you're not enough. But I see something in you, Sophie. Something real. Something worth nurturing." Sophie felt a surge of hope, something she hadn't felt in years. Could this be the beginning of something new? Was there a way for her to finally get the attention and love she had always craved? The woman continued, "I've been watching you, Sophie. Your potential, your talent, your heart. You deserve more than what you're getting now. I want to offer you an opportunity to work with me, to work in a place where you will be seen, where you will be valued." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The woman smiled again, this time with a knowing look. "A place where your dreams can come true. But I can't do this alone. I need someone who will be by my side, someone who has what it takes to succeed, someone who believes in themselves." Sophie's mind raced. Could this be real? Was this woman offering her the chance of a lifetime? Sophie wasn't sure, but she felt a spark of hope. For the first time in a long time, someone believed in her. The woman took a step closer and handed Sophie a business card. "Think about it," she said. "I'll give you some time, but when you're ready, I'll be here." As the woman turned and walked away, Sophie stood there, holding the card in her trembling hand. She had no idea what this woman wanted from her or how this would all play out. But one thing was certain, her life had just taken a turn, and everything was about to change. The next few days were a blur for Sophie. She couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious woman and the opportunity she had offered. Sophie had always dreamed of something more, of a life where she wasn't just the forgotten child of a powerful, distant CEO. She wanted to be seen, to be valued, and for the first time, someone had noticed her. But still, doubt lingered. Was this woman really offering her a chance, or was it all just a game? Sophie knew she needed to make a decision, but the uncertainty weighed heavily on her. Sophie had been walking home from school when she saw the woman again. She was standing outside her office building, looking as poised and confident as ever. This time, there was no hesitation in Sophie's steps. She walked up to the woman and said, "I've been thinking about what you said. I want to take that opportunity. I want to work with you." The woman's eyes softened as she looked at Sophie, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I knew you would come around," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "But this isn't just about work. It's about finding your place in this world, Sophie. It's about showing you that you can be more than what you've been told you are." Sophie felt a flutter in her chest. She didn't fully understand what the woman meant, but the words made her feel something deep inside. "What do I need to do?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling slightly. The woman reached into her bag and handed Sophie a folder. "This is your first step," she said, her tone firm but kind. "I've arranged for you to join a special project at my company. It's a project for young artists, and I think you have the potential to do amazing things. But it won't be easy. You'll need to prove yourself, to show that you're ready for this." Sophie stared at the folder in her hands. It was thick with papers, and she could feel the weight of what was inside. "Thank you," Sophie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The woman smiled once more, a knowing look in her eyes. "This is just the beginning, Sophie. I believe in you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As Sophie walked away, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. This was everything she had ever wanted, but it was also terrifying. She was stepping into a world she knew nothing about, a world full of expectations and challenges. But deep down, Sophie knew one thing for sure. This was her chance. The opportunity she had been waiting for was finally here. Sophie spent the next few days preparing herself for the project. She knew she had to give it her all. The thought of proving herself to the woman, and to her father, made her determined. She wasn't going to waste this chance. As she walked into the office building the next morning, her heart raced with anticipation. She was about to step into a world where her dreams could come true. She was going to make sure she belonged there. Little did she know, this decision would set the stage for a much deeper connection than she had ever expected, and soon, the lines between work, family, and love would blur in ways she never could have imagined. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for Sophie. She threw herself into the project at the company with everything she had. The files the woman had given her were filled with detailed instructions, timelines, and goals that seemed overwhelming at first. But Sophie was determined. This was her shot. She couldn't afford to let it slip away. As the days passed, Sophie worked tirelessly, balancing her school assignments with the demands of the project. She stayed up late, poring over the materials, perfecting her ideas. The office was nothing like she had imagined. It was sleek and polished, with a level of professionalism Sophie had never experienced before. She was surrounded by people who spoke a language she didn't fully understand, but the more she immersed herself in it, the more she began to feel at home. She started getting feedback from the woman, who was always encouraging but had high expectations. Sophie found herself learning more about herself in those moments of critique than she had ever expected. She wasn't just learning about the work. She was discovering strengths she didn't know she had. The woman's faith in her became a driving force, and every time Sophie doubted herself, she remembered the woman's words, "I believe in you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As the weeks went on, Sophie's connection with the woman deepened. They would sit together during breaks, talking about everything from art to life, and Sophie started to see her not just as a mentor, but as someone who genuinely cared about her. It was an odd feeling, but it was the first time in her life Sophie felt truly seen. But just as Sophie was beginning to feel like she belonged, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Sophie walked into the office, eager to show the woman her progress, when she overheard a conversation. The woman was on the phone, and from what Sophie could hear, it sounded like the woman was talking to someone about her father. "We need to figure out how to approach him," the woman said, her voice cool and professional. "He needs to understand what's at stake." Sophie froze, her heart sinking. Was this about her father's company? What did the woman mean by what's at stake? Sophie had always known her father was a powerful man, but she had never fully understood the extent of his influence. She had been so focused on the opportunity the woman had given her that she hadn't stopped to think about what else might be going on behind the scenes. That evening, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She went home and sat in her room, trying to make sense of it all. She couldn't deny the growing connection she felt to the woman, but now there was doubt. Was this all part of some larger plan? Was she being used? Sophie didn't know what to think anymore. But one thing was clear. The woman had become more than just a mentor to her. She had become a person Sophie admired and trusted. Sophie wasn't sure how to handle the conflicting emotions swirling inside her. The next morning, as she walked into the office, she was determined to confront the woman. She couldn't continue pretending that everything was fine when there were so many unanswered questions. Sophie approached her, her heart pounding in her chest. "I overheard your conversation yesterday," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is going on with my father?" The woman looked at Sophie, her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then, with a deep breath, the woman spoke. "Sophie, I didn't want you to find out this way, but there's something you need to know. Your father's company is in trouble, and the stakes are higher than you think." Sophie's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The woman had always been so supportive, so kind. But now, Sophie was starting to see the bigger picture. The question was, where did she fit into it all? The woman's words hit Sophie like a ton of bricks. "Your father's company is in trouble, and the stakes are higher than you think." Sophie's mind raced as she tried to process what she had just heard. Her father, the man who had always been distant, cold, and absorbed in his empire, was facing something she couldn't even begin to understand. Sophie had always known that her father's work was important, but she had never imagined it was in danger. She had always been on the outside, looking in, just trying to get his attention, to prove that she mattered. But now, she was caught in something much bigger. The woman's gaze softened as she saw the confusion on Sophie's face. Sophie, I didn't want you to be involved in this, but I also can't keep things from you anymore. Your father is stubborn, but we can't afford for him to ignore the situation any longer. Sophie felt a lump in her throat. What do you mean? What's happening to the company? The woman sighed, her expression grave. There are forces at play behind the scenes, business dealings that are threatening to bring the company down. Your father has made some risky moves, and now it's all coming to a head. I've been working to help him, but he refuses to listen. That's where you come in. Sophie blinked, taken aback. Me? What can I do? The woman gave her a gentle smile. Your father trusts you more than he lets on, Sophie. He's always been proud of you, even if he hasn't shown it. He needs you to step in, to show him that he can't do this alone. You have the power to help him, but you have to be willing to stand up and be the person he needs. Sophie's heart raced. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for her entire life. The chance to prove that she was more than just a forgotten child. But it came with a heavy price. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders, and she felt a surge of doubt. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Sophie admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I've spent so long feeling invisible. How can I suddenly be the one to fix everything? The woman placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Because, Sophie, you're more capable than you think. Your father may not always show it, but he needs you. He's been running from the truth for too long, and he's afraid to face it. But you have the heart to see things clearly. You can be the bridge between him and the truth. Sophie swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. She had spent so much of her life seeking her father's approval, but now, she realized, it wasn't about seeking approval anymore. It was about saving everything he had worked for, everything that had kept him away from her all these years. She had a choice to make. Sophie took a deep breath and looked up at the woman. Okay, I'll do it. I'll help him, but I don't know how to begin. The woman smiled, her eyes full of pride. You've already taken the first step, Sophie. The rest will come in time. But, remember, this isn't just about the company. It's about you finding your place in his life and in the world. You're not alone in this. Sophie nodded, feeling a sense of determination slowly building inside her. She had always dreamed of being seen, of being someone who mattered. Now, it was time to step up, to become the person her father needed. Sophie wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain. This was her chance to change everything. Sophie woke up early the next morning, her mind already racing. The conversation with the woman, her mentor, her guide, still echoed in her head. Sophie had made the decision to help her father, but the gravity of that decision was sinking in. She had no idea what would happen next, but she couldn't back out now. The weight of her family's future rested on her shoulders, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a purpose. Sophie's father had never been the kind of man to ask for help, let alone admit he needed it. But the woman was right. He couldn't do this alone. And maybe, just maybe, he needed her more than he realized. Sophie grabbed her phone and dialed her father's number. Her hand shook as she waited for him to pick up. The phone rang a few times before he answered. Sophie, his voice was calm, distant as always. Dad, we need to talk, Sophie said, her voice stronger than she felt. There was a pause on the other end of the line. About what? He asked, clearly uninterested. About the company, Sophie replied. I know what's going on. I overheard a conversation. I know you're in trouble. There was a long silence, and Sophie's heart pounded in her chest. She could almost hear the wheels turning in her father's mind. You don't understand, he said, finally breaking the silence. This is bigger than you think. You're just a kid. Sophie clenched her fists, fighting back the urge to cry. She had heard this her whole life. Her father dismissing her, belittling her dreams. But this time, she wasn't backing down. I understand more than you think, Dad, she said, her voice steady. I'm not a kid anymore. I've been working with someone who can help. She's been guiding me, and she believes in me. She believes that I can help you, that I can help fix this. There was another pause. Sophie could hear her father's sharp intake of breath. Who is this person? He asked, his tone more curious now than dismissive. She's someone important, Sophie replied. Someone who's been in the business world for years. She's been helping you without you even knowing. But now, it's time for me to step up. You don't have to do this alone, Dad. Her father was silent for a moment, and Sophie could feel the tension in the air. She wasn't sure what he was thinking, But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had gotten through to him. "I don't need anyone's help," he finally said, his voice cold again. "I can fix this on my own." Sophie closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside her. "You don't have to do it alone anymore," she said quietly. "I'm here, Dad. I can help." There was a long pause before her father spoke again. "Fine," he said, his voice softer now. "We'll talk later." Sophie hung up the phone, her heart still racing. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. She had finally taken the first step in changing her relationship with her father, and maybe, just maybe, she could help him save his empire. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed the woman's guidance. She needed someone who believed in her. And for the first time in her life, Sophie felt like she had someone by her side who truly understood her. That afternoon, Sophie met with the woman again. She had so many questions, so many uncertainties. But as she walked into the office, she knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something much bigger than herself. "I talked to him," Sophie said, her voice trembling slightly. "I told him I could help." The woman smiled, her eyes full of pride. "You did well, Sophie. Now, we need to make sure he follows through. We have a long road ahead of us, but I know you're ready." Sophie nodded, a sense of determination rising inside her. She had made her decision, and now she had to see it through. This was more than just about business. It was about family. It was about showing her father that she was ready to step into a role he never expected. Sophie wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but she was ready to find out. And with the woman's guidance, she knew that anything was possible. Sophie sat in her room that evening, the weight of the day heavy on her shoulders. She had talked to her father, and though he had agreed to listen, there was still a sense of unease between them. It was the first time in a long while that Sophie had dared to speak up, and though it was a small step, it felt monumental. She couldn't help but wonder if it would truly make a difference, or if her father would once again shut her out when things got difficult. The woman's words echoed in her mind. "We have a long road ahead of us." Sophie had known that already, but hearing it from someone else made it feel real. The next morning, as she entered the office, Sophie's resolve was stronger. She had made up her mind to help her father, no matter what it took. But the fear lingered. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear that she wasn't enough. Sophie pushed those thoughts aside as she walked toward the woman's office. She knocked on the door, her heart beating faster with each passing second. "Come in," the woman called from inside. Sophie stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. "You've been quiet," the woman said, her voice calm but observant. "What's on your mind?" Sophie hesitated for a moment before answering. "I spoke to my father. He agreed to listen, but I'm not sure what will happen next." The woman nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That's a good start, Sophie. But you know he won't make this easy. He's stubborn, and he won't admit that he needs help unless he has no other choice." Sophie looked down, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. "I'm afraid he'll push me away again," she admitted. "I've tried so many times to get his attention, to make him see me. I don't want to be ignored again." The woman stood up and walked over to Sophie, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You won't be ignored. But you need to be ready. You need to stand firm, even when it feels like he's shutting you out. He needs you to be strong, Sophie." Sophie nodded, the woman's words sinking in. She had always been the one waiting for her father's approval, but now she had to be the one who pushed for change. She had to stop waiting for him to see her and start making him see her. "What's the next step?" Sophie asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty she still felt. The woman gave her a knowing smile. "Now, we take the next step together. We work on building a plan, something that will show your father that you're serious, that you're capable of making a difference. We'll start by getting him to see that his company's future is tied to more than just his decisions. It's tied to his family, to you." Sophie felt a surge of determination. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about proving to her father that she could be the one to help him. It was about showing him that, despite everything, they could still be a family. As Sophie and the woman worked through the details of their plan, Sophie couldn't help but feel a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just a forgotten child anymore. She had a role to play, and for the first time, she was ready to take it. Later that day, Sophie sat down with her father again. He looked at her with a mix of skepticism and curiosity, as if unsure whether he should take her seriously. But Sophie held her ground. "I know this won't be easy, Dad," she said, her voice firm. "But I believe in this. I believe in you." And I believe that we can save the company together. Her father's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. Sophie could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he was holding back. She wasn't sure if he was ready to fully let go of his pride, but at least now, he was listening. That was enough for Sophie for now. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to back down now. The road ahead would be difficult, but Sophie was ready to face it head on, determined to show her father that family, not just business, was what truly mattered. Sophie stood in front of her father's office, her heart racing. She had come a long way from the girl who had felt invisible, waiting for her father to notice her. Now, with everything at stake, she was ready to make a bold move. The plan was set, and she was determined to see it through. The woman had helped her shape her vision for the company's future, but now it was up to Sophie to convince her father. She had to make him see that there was more to success than just business. Family mattered too. Sophie knocked gently on the door, then opened it when she heard her father's voice calling her in. "Come in, Sophie," he said, his voice as cold and professional as ever. She walked into the room, trying to steady her nerves. The man sitting behind the desk was the same man who had always been distant and focused solely on his work. But Sophie knew there was more to him than that. She could feel the weight of his expectations on her shoulders, but she wasn't going to back down now. "Dad," Sophie began, her voice steady, "we need to talk." He looked up at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "About what?" "About the company," Sophie said, her words firm. "I know you've been trying to handle everything on your own, but you can't do this alone. The business is in trouble, and it's time for us to face it together." Her father remained silent, his fingers tapping on the edge of the desk. "I've been working with someone," Sophie continued, "someone who believes in me. She's helped me see that there's more to this than just numbers and profits. It's about family, about you and me, and what we can build together." Her father's expression shifted, and Sophie could tell he was trying to process what she was saying. "You're talking about that woman," he said, his tone flat. "The one you've been working with?" Sophie nodded. "Yes, she's been guiding me, and I think she's right. We have a chance to save everything, but it requires us to be a team. I can help you, but you have to trust me." The room was thick with tension as her father sat back in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. Sophie couldn't tell if he was truly listening or if he was just waiting for her to finish. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I don't need anyone's help. I built this empire on my own, and I'll fix it on my own." Sophie felt a pang of disappointment. She had hoped that this time would be different, that her father would finally see that he didn't have to carry the burden alone. But she wasn't ready to give up. "Not yet. You don't have to do this alone," Sophie said, her voice softer now. "We're family, Dad, and we're stronger together." Her father's eyes flickered with something that Sophie couldn't quite read. For a moment, it looked like he might say something else, but instead, he leaned forward, his gaze fixed on her. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Sophie felt a surge of hope. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "I want you to listen," she said. "I want you to trust me. Let me help you. Let's work together, for the company, for us." Her father didn't speak for a long time. Sophie felt like every second stretched on forever, but finally, he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice still guarded but less cold. "I'll give you a chance. But this better work, Sophie." Sophie's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and excitement. This was just the beginning, but it felt like the start of something huge. "Thank you, Dad," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I won't let you down." As Sophie left the office, she couldn't help but feel that things were finally starting to shift. Her father had agreed to work with her, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had truly earned his respect. There was still a long road ahead, but Sophie was ready for it. She knew that, with the right guidance and determination, she could help her father turn everything around. This wasn't just about business. It was about proving that family mattered, that they mattered, and that together, they could accomplish anything. Sophie and her father sat together at the large wooden table in his office, papers spread across it. The room, once filled with cold distance, now felt like the beginning of something new, something that Sophie had dreamed of for so long. She looked at her father, who had been more attentive in the past few days than she could remember. For the first time, he was genuinely listening to her, taking her suggestions seriously. They had worked together over the past few weeks, crafting a plan to save the company. They made difficult decisions, navigated through financial hurdles, and put in the hours needed to steer the business in a new direction. But through it all, Sophie noticed something even more important, a shift in her father's attitude toward her. He was no longer the distant, work-obsessed CEO. He was starting to see her, really see her, for the first time. And she was beginning to see him as more than just the man who built an empire. He was her father, the man who had tried his best, even if he had struggled to show it. One afternoon, as they reviewed the final steps of their plan, Sophie's father looked at her with a mixture of pride and something else. Vulnerability, perhaps. "I've been thinking about this," he said quietly. "You were right, Sophie. About the company. About family. I was too focused on everything else, and I didn't see what really mattered." Sophie felt a lump in her throat. "It's okay, Dad. We're in this together now." Her father nodded, his gaze steady. "I couldn't have done this without you." Those words meant more to Sophie than anything else he had ever said. She had always wanted her father's approval, but now, it wasn't about approval. It was about something deeper, trust and connection. That evening, after a long day of meetings, Sophie and her father walked outside into the cool evening air. The city skyline stretched out before them, the lights twinkling in the distance. It was a peaceful moment, one they had never shared before. "I've been thinking," Sophie's father began, his voice soft. "Maybe we should celebrate. All the hard work, everything we've accomplished. It's not just about the company anymore, Sophie. It's about us." Sophie smiled, the weight of the past lifting off her shoulders. "I'd like that," she said. "A real celebration." As they walked back into the building, Sophie felt a sense of hope that had been missing for so long. She wasn't just the daughter of a CEO anymore. She was part of something bigger. She was part of the family, and she was ready to keep building that bond with her father. The next few weeks passed in a blur. They executed the final steps of their plan, and slowly, things started turning around for the company. The financial crisis was averted, and her father began to speak more openly about the future, no longer burdened by the weight of his pride. He started to ask for Sophie's opinion more often, involving her in key decisions. She wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was his partner. One evening, as they wrapped up another successful business meeting, her father turned to her with a serious expression. "Sophie, I want you to know something," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This partnership, this family, means more to me than any business deal. You've changed everything." Sophie looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and love filling her heart. "I'm glad we finally figured it out, Dad. Together." The next morning, as they entered the office, Sophie's father handed her an envelope. She opened it to find a letter of promotion. "You've earned it," he said. "You're more than ready for this next step." Sophie's heart soared. She had worked so hard, not just to prove herself to her father, but to prove to herself that she could make a difference. This was the beginning of something new. Together, they were not just saving the company. They were building a future where family came first, and where they would always be there for each other. And for the first time, Sophie felt like she had truly found her place, not just in the business world, but in her father's life. The road ahead was still long, but Sophie knew that with the bond they had built, there was nothing they couldn't face together.